Welcome to Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. We're back with another edition of Avalara's webinar series discussing the Trump administration's tariffs and their impact on trade compliance. We started this weekly series back in February, so if this is your first time, welcome. If you've joined us before, welcome back. Just a friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review it. We're recording today's event and you'll receive a recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized. Feel free to move or resize the windows. And the additional resources section contains a lot of great related resources, including the slide deck. There are several ways to engage with presenters and attendees today. First, if you have any questions, please submit them using the Ask a Question box. We'll save time at the end for Q&A and probably pepper them in throughout the presentation as well. You may also submit troubleshooting questions there. Second, you can join our attendee chat. Click the icon at the bottom of your screen with the two chat bubbles, and the attendee chat will appear. We encourage you to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. Third, you can react to the presentation by clicking on an emoji and reacting. Last, today's webinar continues on with the 45-minute format to have a little bit more time for Q&A, and since this session is less than an hour and intended to be interactive and responsive, it's not eligible for CPE credit. All right, just a reminder, and for those of you just joining us for the first time today, Avalara's Customer Conference Crush has gone on tour. We've already hit a couple of locations, and we are heading to Atlanta in September 11th, and Dallas, September 25th. And you can check out events.avalara.com for more information. Let's meet today's presenters from Avalara. We have Craig Reed, General Manager of Cross-Border, Shane Bogdan, Director of Sales Cross-Border, and Patrick Frith, Senior Director of Growth Cross-Border. That's all I have for housekeeping, so I will turn it over to Craig to get us started with the presentation.
Thanks, Regina, and gentlemen, welcome back. This is our special edition, the Thursday edition after the July 9th deadline for the reinstatement of the tariffs. So a lot to talk about. There's a lot of news that's come out. Boy, there's been news that's been bubbling up. We've been going back and forth. Before this webinar, even there's stuff popping up with some breaking news. And so we're going to talk a lot about what's been happening, where we stand. We're going to talk about some of the implications to your business, how you can take action with Avalara, and then hopefully we can, as Regina said, we can get into some Q&A. We'll try to pepper them in, so feel free to throw some questions in there as it kind of comes along. First, though, as is our tradition, we like to do a poll question first, kind of get things rolling. So our first poll question is, what is the new deadline for the U.S. reciprocal tariff policy implementation? And you can see the choices there. I'll move to the polling response page. And yeah, while everyone's answering, guys, we got a lot to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, revolving around the pause, right? The delay, which we're answering the question now.
Yeah.
And what that means, implications over the next few weeks.
Yeah. Well, the correct answer, it seems there's a little confusion. The correct answer is August 1st. So that is going to be when the administration has said all the new tariffs are coming into play. So why don't we start out with, let's just do a refresher, Patrick. Maybe you can just go back in time a little bit to what happened on Liberation Day, and then we can go from there.
Sure. April the 2nd, seems like a lifetime ago now, on the Rose Garden, we had the presentation from the White House for the reciprocal tariffs which were to be imposed on countries. There was a worst offender list. There was 59 countries. The rest of the world got a 10% baseline. We've got a snapshot on the left-hand side of the worst. That's not all of them. That's not all 59. Just the main trading partners. And the dark yellow box is the reciprocal tariffs, which were expected to go into effect the following week. That was April the 9th. A lot of confusion. The markets tanked. We all remember that. And it was paused. It was paused for 3 months, 90 days, up until yesterday. The pause was due to expire yesterday. the 9th of July, which is why we had this edition of Tariff Tuesdays on the 10th. However, the news over the weekend, as I'm sure you saw, was that the pause is on again to the 1st of August, with the exception of China. We'll talk about the impact on China shortly, and also the arrangements with Canada and Mexico. But the baseline was in place for every other country. And we expected, over that 3-month period, we expected a slew of trade deals to be done. That's not what we saw. We saw only the UK, Vietnam, and the framework for a China deal established. So 2.5 deals out of the expected 90 in 90 days. We saw 2.5 deals. So brinksmanship, I think, is the word I would use here. There has obviously been a lot of back and forth. We've seen threats, we've seen counter threats. The European Union saying this, and then the US responding in another way. So we've seen a lot of threats. It is yet to be seen where these deals will end up, how they will end up, and when they will start popping. So we can expect a busy summer, I think. But let's move on to the next slide. We've got some conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened on July 9th? Did the slide switch? Oh, there we go. So obviously we had the extension to August 1st. 19 countries have received letters outlining the new tariff rates. And unless those agreements were reached beforehand. So the current 10%, as Patrick said, are in place. The reciprocal 10% are still in place on all countries, including the 19 that received letters. So remember, those don't go into effect until August 1st. And then we'll summarize this in a bit, but Mexico, Canada, China are still sort of on their own little path, it seems. The other interesting thing is that there's a retaliation clause in the letters. So they're saying, you know, if you retaliate with increased tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, we are going to increase it again. So, and we saw that escalation with China, didn't we, when we went up to the 125%. So, you know, that's sort of the, I guess not a carrot and stick, I think it's stick and stick, but that's where it stands. And then IEEPA and Section 232 are unchanged. So that means that, again, Canada, Mexico, and China are not affected because they're under the IEEPA tariffs, and any Section 232 tariffs that were in effect are still there as well. The other big piece of news, guys, was the increase on copper. So we're now at steel, aluminum, and copper at 50%. That we don't know exactly when that's going to come into place. The statement was late July, or maybe August 1st will be the day. And then pharmaceuticals getting 200%, but there's a grace period of 1.5 years before that's implemented. So, you know, net, we have tariff letters sent to the 19 countries. Those are ranging from 25 to 40%. We're going to review that in a second. And the only real trade deals, as Patrick mentioned, were with the United Kingdom, Vietnam, and a framework for China. Not a full trade deal, but a framework. So that's kind of where it stands. And again, we're going to summarize this for you in a second. But let's
yeah, but Craig and Patrick, I mean that slide previously, I mean, that just summarizes everything, how everybody's been feeling in relation to whiplash since the beginning of February. I mean, if we go back and take a look at it, it's like, okay, we're still looking for updates across social media platforms, dates in which things are supposed to be announced or basically relieved. They're being extended. There's additional tariffs being put out there. I mean, this just continues to be this whiplash across the board here, and how businesses are keeping up is wild. I mean, and I know you have some stats here on this.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is the list of countries that got the letters. Interesting here. I mean, I thought there's a couple of things that jumped out to me, guys. One was Japan going to 25%. You know, that's a pretty big deal because of all the auto exports and everything else that are going to be hit with that 25%. So that is going to be a problem. The other interesting thing is they also mentioned, I think it was Malaysia that was mentioned along with, and actually there's a question about this, Vietnam, where if anything is transshipped, now how exactly that gets enforced, we don't know, but meaning that anything that moves through Vietnam but is China origin would be 40%. And they said the same thing about Malaysia, I believe. And there may have been, I might be missing one or two others that they mentioned transshipping, but transshipping is going to be targeted. So we're going to cover this in a little bit about country of origin, but again, that transshipping point was important. What else jumped out to you guys here, when you looked at these tariffs, guys?
Well,
Go ahead, Shane.
Well, the first thing, that I still think is wild is the gaps in relation to Canada and Mexico, that we still really haven't heard much on those. And then on those pieces, they've been holding at that 25% here. It's interesting that we're starting to relieve a majority of these by small percentages. And then, only 2 of these so far have really gone up here. The Vietnam trade deal is very interesting too, because of the transshipment of things. I think somebody just asked them the questions. I think there's still a lot of murkiness around what transshipment actually is defined as here. I know there were some other CEOs and leaders voicing out saying, well, what does this actually mean? I know Howard Lutnick provided some responses. I can put it here in the inbox for the rest of folks to see, but I think that's going to create some additional confusion in how people are actually going to be monitored, how the CBP is going to be monitoring these things. And the China deal, and to the point prior, nothing has actually been formalized here. They put a framework in play when they all met a few weeks ago out in London. I think it was 55%. The U.S. was talking about moving this up to 55% to China, and then U.S. Imports to China down to 10%. But a lot of this, really revolves around something outside of the trade deficit, is revolving around this whole magnet and AI piece. And if everybody's aware, the U.S. is really dependent upon these magnets and goods coming in, being imported from China in order to create specific parts, batteries. Whereas on the other side of the coin, China is really dependent upon our AI technology, chips, et cetera. So there's some really deep topics that still need to be ironed out here. So it's going to be interesting to see where these kind of settle.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of questions about what happens to the 10% that's in place right now. My understanding, and guys, feel free to correct me, but my understanding is that the 10% goes away in lieu of these tariffs. So these are going to replace the 10%. So if you look at the table, I mean, all of these tariffs are well above the 10%, which is going to create an interesting dynamic, I think, because if I was looking at a supplier, if any of my suppliers were on this list, or even on the list of countries that's to come yet, it's a pretty strong indication that the tariff rates are going to be higher than 10%. So I would be trying to get as much product into the country as I could under the 10%. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with shipping from here on out, and before those new tariffs go into place. So why don't we just quickly summarize where we're at now? China, 30% on the majority of goods. So that's a 20% IEEPA import plus the 10% baseline that came in on May 14th. That doesn't include the Section 301 tariffs that are still in effect. So anything coming from China could be well above that number, depending on whether there's an underlying tariff to start with. So I think that the average came in around 55% or something like that. There are some exceptions to that, but under Section 301. But for the most part, China is 30% plus whatever underlying tariff there was. Canada and Mexico. Canada is an interesting one. I'm in Canada, so I get a lot of Canadian news. I don't know if everyone saw this, but Trump threatened to suspend negotiations with Canada because of the digital services tax that Canada was set to implement, meaning that they were going to tax companies like Facebook and Google and those types of companies that were providing services to Canadians but were not paying Canadian taxes. So they have since dropped that to try to get back in negotiations. Canada has set an internal deadline of July 21st to try to get a deal done with the U.S., so we'll see how that kind of shapes up. But for now, we're at 0% for any USMCA compliant goods for both Canada and Mexico. Non-USMCA goods are at 25% for Canada, that's about 40% of exports. Mexico, it's about 50%. And Canada has a cutout for some energy and potash products at 10%. The general tariffs are at, it's a bit of a eye chart there, but are at 10%. That's sort of in the middle there. 10% on all countries. That came into effect on April 5th. So steel and aluminum are at 50%. Copper soon to be at 50%, except for the UK, which did their trade deal and got the 10%. 25% on autos. 25% on countries that buy oil and gas from Venezuela. And as we always say, we don't know how that's policed. And then for the EU, the US has proposed 50% on all EU goods. And I think it sounds from the news like there's rumblings that there's going to be some announcements around the EU pretty shortly. So we'll see what happens there. From a reciprocal standpoint, the China-US deal came out with 10% on Chinese imports, so exports from the US to China, 10%. Canada still has reciprocal tariffs on about $60 billion worth of goods at 25%. I would doubt that those will go away until a deal is announced with Canada. So that's where we stand. Did I miss anything, gents? Any salient points that we missed there?
No, I think that's it all covered. So it's layer upon layer upon layer, isn't it? So we're seeing, and now copper's being introduced in pharmaceuticals later down the line. So it just becomes more and more complicated as days go by. And these columns are just going to get longer and longer and longer, okay, as these layers get added over the coming days and weeks. But before we move on, just to close off Alicia's question regarding the 40% from China to Vietnam. Alicia, that is baked into the trade deal with Vietnam. That's transshipping. So any transshipment from China to Vietnam then subsequently to the US has the 40% applied to it. So it's not a tariff letter, it's actually a trade deal. And then trade deals become legislation, and then it becomes a law. So that's the route they've taken on transshipment. They've done it through a trade deal.
Well, that's tariffs. Let's talk about de minimis, because there is news on de minimis, and there's a lot going on. So as many people probably know, de minimis, meaning the $800 exemption that previously existed, was suspended or eliminated for goods coming from China and Hong Kong. And remember, this is not goods that are just shipping from China and Hong Kong. This is goods that were made in China or Hong Kong. For non-postal shipments, anything under $800 is now subject to all applicable duties. Postal shipments have a different mechanism. That's a flat duty of 54% or $100 per package. Along with that are reporting requirements. So, and we're going to talk a bit more about that in a second. So the full reporting requirements are going to be in effect, and in fact have increased recently. The interesting thing, guys, is that in the Big Beautiful Bill, which has just passed, there was a statement, and actually it was a bipartisan move, to eliminate de minimis effective July 1st, 2027. However, interestingly, there was a statement that came out saying that if the mechanisms to collect the funds are in place in advance of that, they could eliminate de minimis sooner. And we've heard rumblings in the industry. I think, Shane, maybe you heard it firsthand, that it could be eliminated very soon, like within the next month. So, yeah.
I don't think if it's going to be happening, now the question is, when is this going to be happening? And, we all know this was one of the first catalysts to kick off these trade pieces, just because of the amount of de minimis goods that are being imported into the States. Lack of collection, also the safety pieces around fentanyl, things of those nature. And if we all remember too, at the beginning of this, Canada and Mexico got their de minimis cut as well for goods coming in. But, Trump had basically said then, until adequate services are in place to collect those funds. So this plays very much into that piece here. And this, again, has been a bipartisan effort across the board. It's not just in the Big Beautiful Bill here. There are other bills out there, bipartisan, in the House right now to continue to push this forward. But again, it's no longer if, it's when. And again, we're hearing some rumblings that this is going to come a lot sooner than others are expecting here. This July 27th, I'd be very surprised if 2 years down the road we're still talking about this. I think this is going to happen much sooner.
Well, and I was kind of curious, everything seems to be lining up on August 1st, right? So that could be, maybe that's the date. We don't know. But anyway, that'll end the $800 de minimis loophole for all countries. So, again, that's going to make a lot of imports a lot more expensive because there's a lot of things that come in under that threshold, not just from China. And then
billions of items a year. Billions of items a year come under that 800. So, I mean, if you just look around your offices or your homes and think about the things that you've ordered that have been imported from another country, how many are below $800? Probably 95% of the things around you at the moment are under $800.
Yeah.
Well, and Barbara just asked that question. So what's happening to de minimis? Can I ship? So she's shipping clothing items from Europe, made in Europe, to the U.S. direct to consumer. So if this goes away, Barbara, that would mean that, yes, those goods would be dutiable and you would have to declare them and charge your customers duty. We'll talk a bit about how, we can help you do that. But, the bottom line is that everything under $800 becomes dutiable. And interestingly, guys, now, not just like you have to make sure you file properly the customs entry, but also PGAs are applicable. So this is a change as well because PGAs were never applicable to under de minimis goods. And PGAs, for those who don't know, that means partner government agencies. So that's like the FDA, the USDA, the Environmental Protection Agency, et cetera. You would have to file with those agencies. So along with your customs entry comes the PGA declaration that accompanies your customs entry. So this makes bringing goods in under the former de minimis a lot more complicated.
Yeah, and the only other piece I would add here too, just on the de minimis, is if this does get removed, there is the whole piece of DDP and DDU or DAP delivered at place, in which duties are not paid ahead of time. So if you are a direct-to-consumer seller, sending goods from another country and to a U.S. consumer, if de minimis goes away, obviously the applicable tariffs are going to be duties are going to be applied to those. But based upon which carrier you're using, they are going to have additional fees as part of their service. We already know that if you're sending goods, if you're importing goods and they're hitting postal, it's an additional $12 to $14 for DDU processing alone. That does not include any additional tariffs, et cetera. So these fees will add up, but you need to have a clear line of vision in terms of what's actually out there to kind of strategize. Again, this whole piece of how do you be proactive rather than reactive here.
Yeah.
The other thing, guys, is, and in the middle box there, stronger enforcement. So, and I'd encourage you guys to follow the U.S. Customs LinkedIn page. They publish a lot, the Department of Trade, and they are very aware of false country of origin labeling that's going on. And this is why the administration has targeted transshipment, because that is effectively what that is. It means shipping something from China, hoping that because it comes from Vietnam, it'll get a Vietnam country of origin. Well, the CBP knows that and is going to be on the lookout for it. So, the CBP is getting much more, and I think we have something about this later on, but the CBP is getting much more involved, much more vigilant. So, be aware of that as these things change, don't think that it means that you can skirt the regulations.
Sorry, Craig, just on that point, I just want to sort of just address two questions here, one from Alicia, one from Leon. Leon raises a good point. If you funnel everything through Vietnam and then Vietnam to the US, then you're subject to the 40% and not the 55 plus from China. Leon, we don't expect that to be the case because it would already been identified as a transshipment from China. The HS code will therefore link it to whatever the duty rate is of made in China, and the 40% will be stackable. So I would have thought you're looking at 95% plus if it flows through Vietnam.
Yeah.
They wouldn't shut. that would be just a too easy loophole, and everybody
Yeah.
would do it, and the airport of Vietnam would like triple in size overnight. So it would be. We've seen this precedent on stackable. We've seen that it's happened throughout the last 3 months. So I would have thought stackable.
Yeah, and also, for the goods that are stackable, we don't know exactly what percentage of content, like what do we mean by transshipment? What does, if there's value added in Vietnam, does the portion that came from China get the Chinese tariff? Those details are still to be ironed out. So we don't know exactly.
Yeah. The only clarity we have here is from when this was announced was in terms of Lutnick, what he said, here he goes. And he explained it on X/Twitter, meaning if another country sells their content through products exported by Vietnam to the US, they'll get hit with a 40% tariff. So again, clear as mud on that piece, but obviously, yeah.
Yeah, so much more to come. And obviously we'll keep you guys up to date as we go through these webinars. But what we've done this before, but we call it the 4 puzzle pieces, or the 4 horsemen of global trade. They are de minimis. So we've talked a lot about de minimis. You need to know what your de minimis exemptions are. Every country has a different level for de minimis, depending on where you're shipping to or from. The country of origin is vitally important. We're going to dive into that in a second here. So you need to know your country of origin. It needs to be accurate. And you need to know your tariff code classification. This is probably the most important. So, we run into companies all the time. They say, "Oh, we've got our tariff codes. We've had all our stuff classified," and we find typically that those are 40% accurate or less. So make sure your tariff codes, especially now, are accurate. I think even I was just reading actually, guys, that Section 99 used to be has changed 17 times since this has all taken place. And Section 99 used to be about 5% of the HTS. It's now close to 18%. So, make sure you know your HS codes. And then lastly, make sure you declare value accurately. The other thing the CBP is on the lookout for is, are you actually declaring value accurately? Because an easy way to escape tariffs is just to say that your goods are worth less. Well, there's very specific rules around how you declare value. So make sure you're aware of those. But let's talk quickly about country of origin, because guys, this is where people are really confused. And we talk to shippers all the time, companies that believe that point of origin, so where the product shipped from, is the country of origin. That is not the case. The country of origin is where the product is made, processed, or assembled. So where the majority of the value is added. And you can see in the middle post, again, this is the Office of Trade from the CBP, which I'd encourage you to follow, that you can read it. Do you think that routing your goods through a low tariff country changes country of origin? Think again. The other thing is, if you do that and you misdeclare country of origin, look at and this is what they say right in the post: steep fines, seizure of inventory, business disruption, loss of import privileges. So can you imagine the disruption that would cause? Criminal charges even. So it's very, very important that you understand country of origin and you get it right. So, make sure folks that you do that. All right. I think we have some, just to kind of highlight the point of what the CBP has been up to.
Yeah.
Shane, we have some trade statistics here, which are pretty interesting.
Some new ones came out. I think last time we flashed these up, it was about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but the latest ones just came out as of June 29th. So obviously July is not in here. First figure, everything that we highlight down below is everything that's new for, 2025. So you can see in total there's about close to $59 billion that was collected this year that's never been previously collected before. And this is stemming from these IEEPA tariffs, as well as the Section 232 on automobiles. Again, these were not generated in prior years. What's even more interesting is that from a total standpoint year to date, or as of June 29th, the U.S. CBP has collected close to $109 billion in total duties, taxes, and fines since January. Last year, to put in perspective, for full year 2024, it was $88 billion. We've already exceeded the collection of the prior year. So Obviously, that's stemmed by this additional $59 billion through these IEEPA and Section 232 auto tariffs. But I mean, these are some extremely large numbers that the U.S. is collecting, and this is also why they're enforcing these things, Craig. I mean, based upon your pieces, they're going to go in and they're going to make sure that they are collecting the figures that are owed.
Yeah, especially since this is a new tool for revenue collection. So let's talk about some trade impacts, guys. What's
Yeah,
look at this. It's pretty interesting.
That's right. So we've got an update on this slide. You may remember from previous webinars, we were showing up until April, but now we have May's and June's statistics. So the US has had a trade deficit for decades. It's not a bad thing necessarily. It just means more money is spent on importing products than is collected from exporting products, hence the trade deficit. The US is a consuming nation and it imports from around the world. So over the last year or so, we saw that rise to over 100, the trade deficit to over 100 billion. And it was pretty much up there for a good half a year. But then we saw the impact of the tariffs, the turbulence that we started reporting on back in February, and we saw that huge drop. So imports dried up. Okay, dried up because of uncertainty, because of turbulence, all the emotions that we're all feeling. What we did expect and what we have now seen is that small uptick in imports. So the gap reduced, the deficit reduced because US-based companies were taking advantage of the 3-month pause. So they were stockpiling. They were bringing things into their warehouses. They've got half an eye on the holiday season coming up towards the end of the year. They want to make sure they've got the product in on that 10% baseline. So we did expect that uptick. What remains to be seen now is if that will continue over the next 90 days, because remember that pause has been extended until August the 1st. So we'll wait and see. But that's the state of affairs for the deficit.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a flurry of activity because the tariffs that have been announced, the letters, are higher than the baseline 10% that's in effect until August 1st. So if it were me, I'd be importing as much as I could right now before anything else happens. But so on that note, good segue, what can you do to build a resilient supply chain? Well, you can diversify your shipping carriers or your sources of supply. So you can localize your supply. So look for lower tariff suppliers. You can automate your global trade compliance to try to lower the impact or understand the impacts. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second. You can work with your customs broker and lean on their network and expertise, although I would caution you that those folks are incredibly busy right now and frankly overwhelmed. So, they may take a little longer to answer. And we talked about the 4 horsemen. Make sure your product details are compliant. Make sure you know de minimis. Make sure your country of origin is correct. Make sure your value is correct. Make sure your tariff codes are correct. And then, as we just kind of mentioned as the segue, build some inventory to absorb some short-term headwinds if you believe that it's going to come in at a lower tariff rate. So, the 10% versus, the average looks to be somewhere between 25 and 30% for the new tariffs and tariff letters. So that would indicate to me that things are going up. So on that note, guys, some interesting news out of Nike.
Yeah, and I'm just responding back, to a couple different questions here just in the meantime. And I just sent one to Shane. Shane, I know you're always on here, so thanks for always joining us. And then somebody else on COO. Just folks on the COO front, it's very hard for us to give, what the country of origin is based upon goods. It's really based upon the markets of substantial transformation. This is a big part right now. Obviously, we talk about COO. Our kind of advice is to speak to a trade attorney broker. We know that they're actually getting inundated right now based upon, determining what is the appropriate COO. So I replied to some others in the chat, Shane, here. But Craig, to your piece, we've been talking about those 5 points previously on how we kind of go through and mitigate risk across the board here and be proactive. Well, it's funny. Nike just announced the other day another company going public and basically stating what they believe is going to be the impact to their business from these tariffs. And they said about $1 billion across the board here, which is they just took the lowest hit they've had in years in terms of a quarterly revenue perspective. But they outlined on the call how they're addressing the tariffs line item by line item. And a lot of these mirror exactly what we've been promoting over the past 8+ weeks here, optimizing sourcing mix and allocation differently across countries, partnering with suppliers to mitigate cost, looking at surgical price increases. We've been doing the polling questions on, okay, now if a duty rate's coming in, are you going to then be pushing that to your client? Are you going to be adding a surcharge, et cetera? And then evaluating other, unfortunately, cost restructuring across the board here. But a lot of these are mirroring up in terms of what we've been stating.
Yeah, and great segue to the poll question. So for the folks on the webinar, how are you planning to adjust? Are you diversifying your suppliers? Are you switching to local? Are you investing in new trade technology, rethinking your distribution strategies? There's some other strategy that we haven't listed or you don't know yet. And remember, you can select multiple of these. So if you're doing 2 of the 3 or 3 or all of them, let us know. We'll give you a couple more seconds to go through that.
Just to answer Mita's question whilst they're going through that, Craig. So BRIC countries, how are they going to be tariffed? So Brazil has just been threatened with a 50% tariff.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that, didn't we? Yeah,
that's right. So that's just been threatened. It's to do with the former president's trial. There's a link there to there's a political link to that 50%. Russia, well, we know there's that sanctioned, that country, so you can't import from Russia anyway. India did not get a letter, wasn't in the 19, but they seem to be making progress behind the scenes on a deal, big trading partner. And China, well, that's the 55% plus. So BRIC countries, I would say India's looking best of the 4.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So. Yeah. Interesting results. Looks like diversification and switching to local, you combine those two, it's close to 65%. Rethinking distribution strategies and a whopping 43% just don't know. And I would guess that's because the dust hasn't settled yet. So here's another question for you folks. What are your plans you saw what Nike did. What are your plans for addressing the increased cost of global tariff on your goods? Are you going to pass it on to the consumers? Or the customer, pardon me, are you going to include a surcharge, absorb it? Are you going to share the cost with your suppliers or some other strategy? And again, you can choose multiple of these. So if you could let us know what you're thinking here, that would be great.
Barbara K, Taiwan was not one of the letters. So Taiwan is somewhere in the 30s, I think. It will be 10% until the 1st of August. And then the 30-odd% will be imposed on Taiwan unless a trade deal struck.
Yep, 32% there. I'm actually going to drop a link in. We've been following this, so the latest rates. Barbara, I'm going to reply to yours, and then everybody else should be able to see this.
Yeah, look at this. So passing the costs on the customers, including a tariff surcharge. So if you reverse this a little bit, it would indicate that over 80% are going to pass on the cost in some form to the customer, which would indicate to me that we're looking at some inflation coming. I don't think that shoe has dropped yet. I think that some of the inflation figures we're going to see in the next quarter are going to be higher as a result of, and we talk to businesses all the time, and folks are absorbing as much as they could. And I think that time is kind of winding down where companies can continue to absorb it. So, how can businesses keep up with these changes, guys?
Well,
yeah. Go ahead, Shane.
No, across the board here, I think the folks that have listened to us, all these weeks is obviously you're seeing the common theme here. CBP's pushing penalties and fines across. You don't want to get hit with these things, let alone do you want to start overcharging, undercharging, customs duties, imports, providing, overcharging your client or undercharging those clients. And then having to be on the hook for those. So you want to understand what the applicable duty rates are going to be. And then obviously all of these additional added costs as part of the supply chain. Again, if you're importing goods and they're under de minimis and they're hitting DDU, how do you understand what those fees are, et cetera? And again, we've always been saying you're not alone in this, because this is a key piece here. And really, we can help out here. Duty calculations with our AvaTax cross-border service. Understand what those applicable duty rates are. We're constantly keeping those things updated. We have Slack chains going off every time a new HS code gets updated or new tariff rates are announced. They're loaded. Tariff code classifications, clearly one of the four horsemen of global trade here. Understanding what those classifications are on your good ahead of time. Trade restrictions and trade content management. Now that they added this additional piece upon PGAs, we actually have flags in our system that if those goods are being imported to the US, is there a flag on those PGAs? So you're going to want to understand these things ahead of time. And again, we have been pushing the be proactive versus reactive on this stuff. So we can touch upon all of these and help everybody out from a proactive standpoint.
Hey, Shana, Ali asked, are any other resources besides the U.S. government website for HTS codes and tariffs? We actually power one of those, the Department of Commerce one. But yes, we can help you with that. So if folks need tariff codes, and I believe we have a demo coming up.
Yeah, it's going to show that. The demo is going to show it.
Yeah.
Ali and Laura, your question will be answered in the demo as well. You're having problems with your broker doing the correct HS codes. So you will see in this demo how you can take control of your HS codes, and you tell the broker the HS codes that you want using for your product, because it equates directly to the tariff you're anticipating on your product.
Yeah. Okay. So let's roll the demo, Regina, if you don't mind.
Welcome to the Avalara Tariff Content Classification Tool demo. Click to learn how this tool can accurately classify your products. First, choose the country of import. In our example, we will use the US. Click to proceed. Next, select the country of origin. In our example, we will use China. Click to proceed. Next, let's describe our product. Click to proceed. Now, we are ready to classify. Click to proceed. The tariff classification tool needs to know a few more details. Click to select the upper material. Select the lower material. Click to proceed. We've now reached an HS. Click to drill down to reach the HS10. Since our product is a men's golf shoe, click to drill down. Since our product is not welt footwear, click to drill down. We have reached the HS8. Click to find the HS10. We have now reached our HS10. Click to see rate description. Here we can see the total duty amount for this product. This totals 28.5% general rate plus 125% punitive rate, which equals 153.5%. This concludes the demo.
Well, as you might have guessed, that was produced when the China tariff was at 125%. So I guess we got to re-record the demo, folks. Just so you guys know, that is not the only set of tools we have for tariff code classification. We have a number of different versions of it, depending on what your particular needs are. We have different versions of our calculation engines, etc. So if you would like a follow-up from one of our reps to discuss the options for your business and what of our tools might apply for you, we would be happy to do that. So I'll just leave it on this while folks are answering the question. Maybe we can get to
I see one here from Billy about USMCA, and unfortunately, it's going to be a similar kind of statement that we have about country of origin. But USMCA, the rules dictate USMCA is going to be based upon the specific good and components of that, and they basically call it regional value of content. So let's just say automotive parts, for example. I believe the region for an automotive part or an engine to qualify for USMCA, I believe it has to consist of 75% of those goods being manufactured within North America, but different parts or different goods have different regional value of content on those things. So again, unfortunately, we have to kind of stay trade attorney, your broker, et cetera, to kind of help you out on that front.
Yeah, here's another one from Terry. So we do get this question quite often. If you do a tariff surcharge, is the sales tax exempt or is it taxable? As as goods cost. So it is taxable. The sales tax applies to the tariff as well for, I believe, all states. We've had one of our state sales tax experts on and confirmed that. So that's the case for state sales tax. Yeah. Another one from Barbara. So to sell to the U.S. from abroad might be better to ship from factory, pay fees on production costs, and have a U.S. warehouse than paying fees on retail price of shipping direct to consumer. Yes, that is I would say that that's probably the case. And, do an analysis of what your storage costs and so forth and finishing costs are going to be in the U.S. versus shipping a finished good. You could take a look at that. All right, so I believe we're at time. These things always go so fast. We've got a lot of links. We've got a lot of resources on our website that can help you out, including a link to the demo that we showed you. You will get a copy of this, so don't worry that you can't click on the webinar itself. You will get links that will be working in the presentation, and along with a glossary of trade terms. And then we have, I believe, some more tariffs. Our Tariff Tuesdays are continuing, so those will, I don't know if the links are up yet, but they should be shortly, so feel free to register for those. And we have all kinds of other webinars going on as well, so feel free to check those out. In the meantime, thank you again for attending, and we will talk to you again next Tuesday. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys, and we'll sign off.
Cheers.